Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we're all a part as nature's children, with deep gratitude for all the generations before us who made such choices that we're here at this extraordinary moment in human history. In this spirit, I want to welcome you all to today's session of Humanity Rising. This is the fifth and final day of a program on self-health, how we, through natural means, through breathing, through sound, through tarot, through polarity, through a variety of therapeutic techniques, accessible to everybody, no matter where you are or what your condition is, that we can fortify our immune systems. We can bolster our psychological and emotional states. And we can make ourselves as vital as we need to be to navigate at this time an extraordinarily complex global situation which is spinning out of control. That's our moment in the world today. We're in code red with climate. It is now both undeniable and unavoidable that the ecological system in which humanity finds itself and lives and breathes and has its being is experiencing escalating turbulence because of global warming. Now with the Ukraine war, we're seeing a deconstruction of an already fragile global order, as countries around the world are now beginning to realize that the center does not hold, and they have to look to themselves. So right at the moment where we all should be coming together to stop climate change, big oil is back. And we're being told that climate change has to wait because the priority is war. And in the middle of all this, we as individuals have to be able to synthesize everything that's happening in our external world with an internal capacity that can absorb the chaos and transmute it in some way into coherence. So everything we've been talking about this last 5 days is about how do you generate inner coherence, which leads to healing naturally, not through pills, not through big pharma, but using the techniques that humans have known almost since time immemorial to bring health and fortitude to our basic beings in a world of chaos. So that's our program this week. And as we enter our final day, we're going to be talking about mental health, which may be the most important of all, because if you can't figure it out, know what you should be doing, you won't do what needs to be done. So this is our grand finale today. And to begin our program and to start, as we always do on Humanity Rising, with some heart coherence, we want to bring Neha Misri, who was here on Monday for our program, who comes from the vast subcontinent of India, to open us up to each other and to our deeper heart. So Neha, welcome to Humanity Rising, and I turn the program over to you. And then after our blessing for the day, Deanna Rice, who's been the convener of the entire program, will come in and introduce our session for today. So Neha, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim. Namaste and good morning good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you're joining us from. I want to share a poem today, which is about transformation. It is also about art, which for me has been and continues to be a profound source of healing in myself and in the world. And realizing that the two are so deeply tied together. So thank you for receiving it. It's called If Change Were a Piece of Art. If change were a piece of art, I will make a start, knowing that you get there part by part, knowing that it gets messy before it gets pretty, knowing that the lines may not be perfect. Maybe it will be a blank canvas made by someone's very rough hands, waiting for me to splash my colors, waiting for me to give it a form, waiting for me to change its destiny and my own hand in hand. Maybe it will be a discarded piece of art found under the rubble of a local Goodwill store, waiting for me to pick it up despite the scratches, waiting for me to not give up on it, waiting for me to tell it that I see beauty, not junk. I will paint the elephant in the room pink. I will give wings to the frog of the well. I will make the sun shine in the darkest corners of this earth and human heart. If change were a piece of art, if change were a piece of art, I will take my brush and make a start, knowing that inch by inch a painting is completed, knowing that as a child I had the courage to paint mighty rainbow castles, knowing that a tiny iridescent hummingbird migrates miles and miles and miles, starting with a little tiny flap. So start, even if you do not see the end of the road, for you can imagine the end of the road. For what you can imagine, you can create. For you have to start somewhere, someday. So start. Let us make change an art. What better day than today? What better place than here and now? What better person than the one you see in the mirror every single day? So I hope may the rest of the day and the ripples of this beautiful, beautiful gathering, may it connect us to the art of change and the art of life and art of transformation, which needs us to change ourselves so we can change the world. Thank you so much for having me and for listening. And with that, I invite wonderful Dehana, who has been such a beautiful artist, weaving this whole week together. Thank you, Dehana.
Oh, thank you, Neha. Blessings. That was just perfect for what I really have in store for today. Change. Change that we're open to, because we are on a tipping point. There is so much that's bombarding us. And this week has been so amazing with the fabric that we've weaved, or the toolbox that we've created for everyone to dip in and use those tools for change. And today, mental medicine, it is the elixir of our lives that is going to be the catalyst for change. And I'm so honored to have two people that are really influential in my practices. Their work has been. And what's fascinating to me, maybe kind of heart-wrenching too, is their husbands that are now deceased. They've continued their work. And to start out the program, I want to invite Susan Shore-Femi in, who is in the Princeton Biofeedback Center that her late great husband, Les Femi, had developed and started many decades ago, and working with this model called open focus meditation. He had found, and Susan as partners in their work, developing this amazing openness of space when we meditate, and what that does to our brains, our bodies, because we're in such a narrow focused reality, so much information, so much happening at us every moment of our day now to keep up with this world that we live in. So I invite Susan Shore-Femi into the call. And she is a psychologist that is
social worker.
Oh, social worker. Okay. A PhD in social work, and has helped this amazing methodology. What I'm fascinated with is dissolving pain. The book also that both of you co-wrote, and then open focus meditation to really give an understanding of what that is to our audience, and how to navigate that mental narrow focus in order to open and blossom to more and more capabilities for change. So I turn the program over to you. I'll come back in.
Thank you. Right now, as you're looking at the screen, you may notice that you are focusing on me to the exclusion of everything else, and you're focusing on understanding and hearing me as we have been trained to as good listeners. But what if you just made me part of a larger purview by opening up to space that you can see around me, space that you can feel around you? That space is, there's more space in the room that you're in than there are objects, and yet you've screened it out as we've been trained to through narrow focus. So just by opening up to the space inside and outside your body can have a big impact on everything in your body and all your brain waves. And later on, if we have time to talk about dissolving, when we have something that is disturbing us, a feeling or a pain, that we don't do with that sensation what we do with good sensations. If good sensations come in, you open up and merge with it. But as soon as there's something you don't like, you narrow focus and separate from it. So you may have gathered that I'm talking about two dimensions of attention. One that's more diffuse and includes everything through the experience of space, and one that at the same time becomes more intimate, more merged, more into all the sensations and the space that's being observed. Les, my late husband, Les Femi, has been around since the late 60s. And after his postdoc at UCLA, he had done a postdoc lab work at the Brain Institute of UCLA. And he discovered, I'm not going to go into the academic details, but his work showed him that when the brain is producing synchronous packets of information, it runs up the nervous system in a different way than when the brain is temporal and has one thing and then another. So he said, well, what is it about synchrony or simultaneity? Why is this important in this particular experiment? And it led him to remember that alpha waves, which are a brain wave of relaxed alertness, is when we start to open up and diffuse and immerse in our attention, alpha waves become abundant, and that's when we're relaxed and alert. So he thought, well, I'm going to work with alpha waves and see if it's possible to teach the brain to produce more alpha at, let's say, 10 cycles per second, and more synchrony, so that the brain waves peak and trough at the same time. And those of you who know Les's work will discover he thought it would be really easy because he was a meditator. He had been a psychologist. He knew guided imagery and relaxation techniques and meditation. And he thought, well, and he felt like a relaxed guy. And so he took an EEG instrument. There was no such thing as neurofeedback in those days, but he converted a standard EEG so it would give him feedback when he was producing more of these nice synchronous alpha waves. And he thought he's going to have an easy time. Well, if you look at his chart of his attempts, you'll see that he spent 12 two-hour sessions separated by days, trying to produce more alpha, and was very shocked and surprised to see that he couldn't do it. And it was only after that 24-hour period that he recognized either he couldn't do it or it wasn't doable. Well, fortunately, he was still hooked up to the instrument. And in a moment of great despair, he gave up. He thought this was going to be his life's work. He was going to prove that you could change brainwave activity, which of course reflects the central nervous system and all the peripheral systems, that it was possible at conscious will to change brainwave activity, and he couldn't do it. Well, by luck, he was still hooked up to the instrument. And the moment he gave up, even though it was despair, it wasn't a happy feeling. He just gave up into it. His alpha synchronous waves went way up. So the first clue was, okay, it has something to do with giving up and not trying and surrendering. And it doesn't have to be a happy feeling. It could be to anything. Shortly after, he took a professorship at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. This was about the late 60s, early 70s. And he built a lab on campus. And this was the time when consciousness training and those kinds of understanding were very prominent in our communities, especially young people. So he had lines around the block of people who wanted to ride on Femi's machine. And he told them his story. And he would, one by one, he would connect people to the instrument. And he would give them relaxation techniques and guided imagery and beautiful smells and pretty music, everything that you would associate with letting go. And to his surprise, his subjects had the same problem he did. And it wasn't until by sheer luck he came across a 20-question inventory that was used as a hypnotic induction technique. And when 2 out of those 20 questions were asked of all subjects, they had a noticeable and significant increase in whole head alpha synchrony. And those 2 questions were, can you imagine the space between your eyes? Can you imagine the space between your ears? Well, it took Les some time to figure out what was so important about these 2 questions when nothing else had affected brainwave activity. And over time, he began to understand that the phrase, can you imagine, encourages a kind of effortlessness. You don't imagine by trying too hard and narrow focus. You imagine by just sort of hanging out. So everyone knew alpha is a state of effortlessness. So that phrase kind of captures that attentional style. And then it was bringing people into their body, the space between the eyes, the space between the ears. And you may have recognized that we tend to be visual thinkers. We think and we look a lot. And we don't really bring body feeling in unless we're doing something specifically physical or we're in pain. So just by bringing people into a neglected sense, the feeling sense, that had some benefit. But the big thing was space. And it's become the hallmark of the open focus technique. What is it about space? Why would space have such an impact on EEG? And now we know that in order to open up to space, space is everywhere and runs through everything. The atom is mostly space. If you want to attend to space, you have to get bigger because it's everywhere. It's not a little narrow focus, like narrow focusing on my picture. It's like taking in everything, the space that everything exists in. And then in order to feel the space in a more palpable, sensitive way, you have to get more into it. You can't do it from afar. You can't say, oh yes, that's space. You have to kind of merge with the space. So he later developed, well, who opens and who immerses? What opens and what immerses? And here I think one of his great work is that his recognition that there is a behavior you engage in, and that behavior is how you pay attention, not to what, but how you pay attention. And that when one pays attention in a way that moves from a narrow, separate attention, which we've been trained to do, into a more diffuse and immersed attention, everything changes. And brainwaves become more rhythmic and come into the alpha range. The autonomic nervous system, which is a reflection of the brainwave activity, the over-aroused sympathetic autonomic system calms down and the parasympathetic autonomic system comes up. So there's a nice balance. You can run across the street and activate sympathetic over-arousal, get to the other side and be parasympathetic, just like your animals do. You know, if you see an animal hearing a noise, the animal narrow focuses and you can see the muscles in the neck and the alertness. But after the crisis is over, animals go back to hanging out. Well, we don't. We stay stuck in this narrow focus. So he is beginning to put together this idea that the most basic behavior we engage in is the way we pay attention. And by learning to pay attention in various attentional styles, so we're not so narrow and objective, you can learn to change brainwaves and all the cascade of the physical effects. And that's the basis of open focus. And space becomes so predominant because it's that first step of diffusing your attention to include everything. And so the exercises we do, you know, right now, as you listen to me and you're remembering, you probably forgot because we're so addicted to narrow focus. You can look at me and see the space around me, see the space in your room, start to feel the space in and around you. And the more you do that, the more you're moving into an attentional state that brings about normalization. And conversely, when you are in that diffuse state, it's easier to immerse in everything. You know, if you go to a concert and you're busy objectifying the violinist, that's one experience. But if you just merge with the music and open up to everything, it's a totally different experience. And you have the power to choose. Sometimes you want to be one way, sometimes you want to be the other. The other interesting thing is that and I'm not going to go into detail, but he discovered with brainwave activity, there are two kinds of brainwaves. One are brainwaves that are synchronous, that peak and trough at the same time, and the other are asynchronous, where they don't peak and trough at the same time. The brain needs both, and the way the brain creates objective reality, sees the trees out there, knows what our thought is, has our feeling, is through asynchrony. And the way that we start to drop back from the objective world and have a sense of oneness is synchrony. So we need to have both, but yet we're not taught how to move out of narrow focus into that sense of oneness, unless we're trained in some technique, in a breathing technique, in a yogic technique, in a meditation technique, in an artistic technique. We're all of us at this conference are talking about the same thing. Les just wanted to describe the brain's activity when those wonderful states are achieved. Nothing can work to change your inner world without an attentional shift. So his idea was, why not teach attention directly? And so that's the open focus method. I don't know how much time I have, and maybe Deanna, you could.
You can keep going, Susan, and definitely we want to experience the practice.
Oh, okay. So as I said, that space is the beginning, and because space is not generally recognized as something we attend to, some of us have an easier time experiencing space than others do. And so we usually start out with beginners with the spaces in the body that are easier to feel because we have more cells in the sensory motor cortex for feeling certain parts of our body. The sensory motor cortex runs from ear to ear and has all the cells devoted to feeling and movement. And there are more cells, there's more real estate for these two fingers, also hands, also mouth and tongue. Wherever we're more differentiated, we have more real estate. So with beginners, we start out having them feel small spaces, the spaces in their thumbs, the spaces in their forefingers, and then we gradually go to bigger and bigger spaces. So let me do it in the beginner's way. Some of you are so far, you already know a lot of this and you're going to find it easy. But some people, maybe like I was, I hated it. I had a hard time. I didn't want to do it. If I weren't courting Les Femi, I would have run in the other direction. And so I needed a little more help. But if you could close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or soft eyes if you keep them open. Can you imagine feeling the presence of your thumbs, knowing that they're there because you feel them? Can you imagine that these thumbs are also filled with space? If space is a little difficult, 3 dimensions, fullness. But imagine, pretend that they're filled with space. Can you imagine now feeling the space of your forefingers? Can you imagine, as you feel the space that fills your thumbs and forefingers, that you can feel the space between your thumbs and forefingers? If that feels more difficult, bring your forefingers and your thumbs slowly close to each other, then move away and feel the movement of those fingers through space, and then slowly keep them still and feel the remaining space. So can you imagine feeling your thumbs and forefingers and the spaces between them? Can you imagine feeling all your fingers filled with space, as well as the space between them? Can you imagine feeling both hands filled with space? And hands and arms filled with space simultaneously. As you continue to feel your hands and arms filled with space, can you imagine feeling your feet and legs filled with space? And as you continue to feel your limbs filled with space, can you imagine also feeling your lower torso filled with space? Your belly and your buttocks and your internal organs. And your upper torso, organs, esophagus, spine, all filled with space. Can you imagine feeling your shoulders and trapezius muscles filled with space, and at the same time feel the volume of your neck filled with space? Can you imagine feeling your jaw and tongue and gums and lips and throat filled with space? And your nose and nasal passages, your cheeks filled with space. Can you imagine feeling your eyes and the distance between your eyes and the muscles around your eyes filled with space, as well as your forehead? And your ears and the distance between your ears filled with space. And your scalp filled with space. So you're feeling your whole head filled with space. Can you imagine now feeling your whole body filled with space? And as you continue to feel your whole body filled with space, can you also imagine feeling the space on either side of you to the walls? So you're feeling body and some space around you. Can you imagine feeling the space in front of you and behind you to the walls? And above you and below you to the ceiling and the floor. So you're feeling your whole body filled with space and surrounded by space simultaneously. Can you imagine what it would be like if the space inside your body and outside your body was one continuous space? And that this space can extend outward on all sides as far as you can feel it without efforting. You're effortlessly feeling the space inside and outside. So sensitively, so palpably. And it's as if you're becoming space. Space is foreground. Doesn't mean you can't feel senses. The senses can punctuate the space, but you're allowing yourself to feel this all from the vantage point of becoming space. Bathing in this space. And space is everywhere and runs through everything. And we have all these senses through which to experience this space. But we can also hear space. We call it silence. And you're feeling and hearing space. And without opening your eyes, you can imagine seeing this space. Even taste and smell rise up out of emptiness or space and fall back in. So we can imagine tasting and smelling space. And of course, our thoughts rise up, flow by, but there's an emptiness of mind, a mind space that they exist in. We're so used to narrow focusing on them that we think we are our thoughts. And you don't need to shut down thoughts, just allow them to be like a sound or like a feeling. They're just there, and the rest is mind space. Even time has a flow, past, present, and future, and we can be aware of that passage, another kind of space. And once more, can you imagine being aware of this multi-sensory experience of the space that's really always been there and is there? And right now, give a little emphasis to feeling space. And imagine bathing in this feeling sense of space inside and outside. While you feel any uncomfortable feeling or pain that you would like to dissolve. It's so natural when I ask that question for you to narrow focus on that discomfort, but I'm asking you to have global space dominant and allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you want to dissolve. For me, it's always anxiety. I can always find some in my throat or esophagus or solar plexus. And you may notice that the more you narrow on it, the stronger it gets. But as soon as you allow it to be present in this vast space, the pain is a fraction of what it was before. When you're narrow focusing, it's 100% of your awareness. And can you imagine feeling this discomfort or pain or sensation as you bathe in all the global space? And imagine what it would be like to feel into this discomfort even more, just as you're feeling into space, just like you would if a good feeling came in. So you're bathing in space and bathing in that sensation, which is also filled with space. Cloud of particles filled with space. And that you, the feeler, even as you rest in global space, can rest in the center of that discomfort, feeling the space that fills it and surrounds it, just as you feel the space that fills and surrounds your body. And as you diffuse into space and immerse into space and sensation, your whole nervous system is calming down. You're producing more of these nice, slow alpha waves that are becoming more synchronous. So you're becoming one with everything. Just by changing how you pay attention. So simple-minded. And you can do anything else in that state, breathing or yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, all the techniques, all meditative techniques don't work if you're in narrow objective attention. You have to bring to those tasks an attention that now includes immersion and diffusion into space. And can you imagine slowly opening your eyes? We grip a lot with our eyes, but imagine opening your eyes and seeing the space that all the objects are in. Space and objects exist together, and yet we're always discarding space. Les's theory always was that when we come out of the womb, our first job is to separate ourselves from the environment. What's me and what's my mother, what's me and what's the light outside. So we develop narrow objective skills in order to do that separation, which was important for us. We had to differentiate ourselves from everything else. And then because narrow objective attention works so well, our teachers and our parents liked us to stay in that. And if you weren't in that state, they'd say, pay attention, and that, which meant to people, narrow focus on what you're seeing or doing. And it works, it's very effective, but we've over the years have developed that skill, this narrow objective attention, to the exclusion of diffusion and immersion. And Les wanted to teach how to combine them all. There's nothing wrong with narrow objective attention. It's just overused. And you can use that narrow objective even as you bathe in space. And your nervous system will thank you. And you'll have a different experience, just like many people spontaneously feel it when walking in the woods or when at the beach, which nature tends to diffuse our attention, or listening to beautiful music. It's not that you don't know this state, but you're at the whim of circumstances that, I'm telling you that Les's work says you can do it anytime in the worst of experiences. My clients kid me because I always say, you want to do it in a dung heap. I'm not exactly sure what a dung heap is, but I know it's not a place that we think we would like. But you can do it in any situation so that you're greeting this situation with a normalized physiology and a sense of wellness. And as I said, you can combine it with any of your favorite techniques. So can you imagine as we begin to talk more that every once in a while, imagine space. Notice how quickly we go into narrow focus just by habit. It's just a habit. It's not something that can't be overcome.
Beautiful. Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you.
Wow, I feel floating, as I'm sure many people listening to your voice is so logical and also permission to just be.
So simple. It's so
And
simple. Yeah.
It really is simple, the immersion and the diffusion, and that we do with like woods bathing, when people walk with tall trees, and we already have this capability and this, gear, like changing a gear.
Yes. Yes. I like that image because it's just another gear and you can do everything you need to. Athletes talk about this all the time, that they perform better in this state. Artists perform better. But,
right.
And those of you who are listening, you probably forgot space in the last 30 seconds because we're so trained to forget it that it just takes some practice.
Yeah, and the benefits just in the lab, what Les and you've been able to prove when you immerse yourself in that, and also the connection to nature, that we are, it's like not attachment. You don't have to attach yourself to so much focusing and doing in this and just allowing the letting go principle, and then you become with oneness.
Yes.
It's kind of that oneness envelops you and just takes you wherever you need to go.
Yes. And if the way Les thought about it, if you were having your brainwaves monitored on an EEG and you were in that expanded immersed state, you would see an increase in amplitudes of alpha synchrony. And it's so validating to see your physiology changing. You can, or any form of biofeedback can monitor it. And we have options. We don't have to always be narrow objective.
Right, exactly. It's another part of our toolbox.
Yes.
And interesting to me the way that you said we can do it within other activities of relaxation response, yoga, tai chi, qigong.
Yes. We
Um,
often have, every once in a while, a meditator comes into the office and says, all my friends are getting great results and I'm not getting anything. And then when we look at their brainwaves and teach them a little open focus, they bring that attention to their techniques and they suddenly get it. So we're always manipulating our attention. And athletes, as I say, we think of, well, it's a non-arousal state, but you can have peak performance in that state. If Les works with so many athletes who found that their performance was better. If you look at that EEG, it's like Les thinks of it as a zero bias state. Most of the time when you're narrow focus, you've deployed your resources. You're already hung up on this or that or whatever you're narrow focused at. And then if you need to do something different, you have to pull yourself away. But if you're already in a zero bias state, you can deploy at will your resources.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just this presentation in a different way. I mean, I've gone through the program twice, and now I'm hearing it in a different way as a platform and foundation to really basically do anything.
Yes. Yes.
Anything, like starting your day with this space.
Yes.
And the focus on it, and then activity after activity, activity, you can actually bring yourself into a peak place to perform that activity because you're holding it in this.
And how do we expect to have compassion if we're narrow objective? I mean, talk about the world. If you were one with everything, you couldn't do harm to yourself.
Oh, I love that.
And we live in a world that values separateness and values narrowness. This is this, and I'm that, and that's that. And what is it? The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything is clear and undisguised. But make the slightest exception, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. It's a Buddhist sutra that it's all our picking and choosing. I'll pay attention to that, but not that. But I like this and I don't like that. That's
right. Yeah. Beautiful. Oh, yeah. It's just, it's in coherence with our true nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And coming from within, but then space and expanding it out.
And you want that narrow objective. The reason I cited watching an animal, if you have a pet, you see the pet lollygagging on the floor, and then there's a noise, and you suddenly see the animal checking it out, maybe even going after something, or a lion with its prey. And that narrow objective attention has utility. It does promote a different kind of attention. It gets your muscles going, and you can go into fight or flight, which is something you might want at certain times. But then, as I said, the animals go back to lollygagging and we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a hardwired thing in the brain and the habitual, pathways that we go down.
Yeah.
And creating like more of an expanded pathway, like, hey, you can go down this way too.
Yes. Habit. You're right. It's just habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Rachel is not here yet, unfortunately.
I gathered that. That's why I kept
Something's going on with maybe a techno thing in New York.
Yeah.
So let's just keep the conversation going. I'm fascinated by the dissolving pain part of it.
Yes.
And I'm sure many people are.
Yes.
If you can expound on that a little bit. I noticed that you brought...
Diana?
Yeah.
Rachel is saying that she's here.
Oh, she is. Where is she?
So let's see.
I'll promote her now. Give me a second.
Oh, okay. Because I kept looking on participants. Is she on the other link?
Just surfaced. So somehow the glitch was resolved.
Okay, wonderful. Where's my friend Rachel? I want to share her with you, all of you. Rachel Epstein is focus on the focus of her late great husband, Dr. Gerald Epstein. Hello, Rachel, welcome.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so sorry we haven't gotten that link to you in the time that I thought it was to you. So, welcome to the program. Have you heard some of what Susan?
I did the whole process and it was lovely. And I had come across her work, not in such depth, but a couple of years back. And what was interesting is to see the correlations between this open focus and how you can use mental imagery also to open focus, but in a slightly different way, and possibly using words in a slightly different manner. But the poet who spoke at the beginning said that whatever you can imagine, you can create. And this is another tool for us to create a pathway to being in a quiet and calm state of being, which is part of, and being open to what the world is bringing you without having to have a fixed narrative of how things ought to be. So in the imagination, we're also exploring space and time, and we're doing this by turning our senses inward. We're very used to turning our senses outward to attach to whatever is going on in the outside world. And as we know, we tend to attach to specific items in what in this asynchronous way of this objectifying and having this narrow focus, as we heard about. So in a mental imagery, we're now turning our senses inward so that we're turning our 5 senses inward to explore our inner reality. And we're taking a 6th sense called the imagination to do that exploration for us. So when we do mental imagery, we are exploring space and time, but we're actually going into the no time, no space zone. So we use a different language to talk about this inner subjective experience that we are coming in contact with. So simply put, the mental imagery, if I were to make the simplest definition, would be called the mind thinking in pictures. So we're used to thinking in many, many ways. We're used to thinking mostly logically in a cause and effect way. But we also have gut feelings, which is a type of thinking, and we have intuitive flashes. And when we think in pictures where we access the imagination, we can actually bring together our mind and body in a new way of being a new somatic awareness. So this is a way of healing because we're actually restoring what we're calling the mind-body connection. And the mind through image, the mind can speak to the body and give it messages of healing. So that's what we do often in mental imagery, is that we are, at the simplest level, we're giving ourselves new messages of healing that we can then use to, in a way, to weed and seed our inner form of consciousness, which includes our body and our mind and our moral sense and our emotions, our mental sense, our social relation. It's all included in this healing process. And of course, we know that what happens in the mind is mirrored by the body. So they're really two sides of the same coin. So what I'd like to do is just go and give us some imaginal experiences so we can use this to see how we can shift our state of being. And perhaps if we were going to speak about open focus, we can go from a closed focus to a more open focus, but the open focus is now an interior exploration. Because in our interior exploration, we make discoveries and find transformations and find messages of healing that are coming from either our deep inner sense, or if we believe in divinity or invisible reality, that we're getting these messages from above as well as from our deep sense of self. So what does everybody, so in this style of mental imagery, because there are a lot and some of them go and flow into more hypnotic ways of being. In this type of mental imagery, we do it very quickly. And we just do a very relaxed breathing to set the stage for ourselves so that we're able to turn our senses inward. And this breathing helps us, again, to turn inward. And I heard on an Ian's talk recently that about 100 years ago, people used to take 5 breaths per minute. And now we take 15 to 20 breaths per minute. So you can see that we're more and more sympathetic dominant by even the breathing patterns that we've established to try and keep up with technology. So to start the imagery process, everybody just close your eyes and sit up straight, because we want to be in a relaxed state, but we want to still be somewhat alert. So we're alert so we can turn our senses inward, as I said. So everyone close your eyes and just take 3 relaxing breaths in your own rhythm. And as you're relaxing, relax your jaw, and you can even take in what we learned in the previous session and just have that open focus feeling as we're breathing it out and then in and out and in. And now on the next inhalation, or the next exhalation, see yourself swallowing a rainbow. And see this rainbow flowing through you, and all the colors flowing through you and beyond you. And see and sense how you're feeling with this rainbow. And then when you're ready, breathe out and open your eyes. So this swallowing the rainbow is very, very quick. You see that in just a few seconds. I don't have any feedback from the audience, but generally people feel well by swallowing a rainbow, right? You feel, and in fact, we know that the rainbow is a sign of hopefulness, right? In the Bible, we see that the rainbow came, and after the flood, there was a rainbow. So whenever we're feeling hopeless or isolated, or we need to relieve a sense of discontent or depression or stuckness, we can just imagine for that moment with eyes open or closed that we're swallowing a rainbow. Now, mental imagery, it can be used for healing emotional issues and physical issues, and I said social issues, and even and everyday issues like having to make a decision. So that it's very active practice. So we can take it out into our world, and if we can not only have it as a morning practice, but we can use it all the time. So if you find yourself, for instance, depressed, here's one for the depression. And of course, Jim mentioned how the world is spinning out of control. So it's natural that we're going to feel depression and stasis or anxiety. We could be running in both directions. But here for a moment, let's just try another imagery. So everyone close your eyes and breathe out 3 times slowly. Again, these long, slow exhalations and normal inhalations. And now imagine there's a dark gray cloud above you. And now blow the cloud or clouds away to your left with 3 strong breaths. These are imaginal breaths you're taking. And after you've blown away the clouds, look to the upper right and see the sun rising. and watch it move to the center of your vision, replacing the dark clouds. And sense and feel the depression lifting as you look to your upper right. And then breathe out and open your eyes. So I said that that when we turn our senses inward, we're actually discovering a new realm called the realm of the imagination. And in the Western spiritual tradition, the imagination is not just our own subjective reality, but actually is a dimension of reality that is as real as our objective world. So we are entering our imaginal realm. And in the Western spiritual tradition, the way that we access the imaginal realm is through the heart, not through the brain, but through the heart. And as we know, the heart has a much larger vibrational field, an electromagnetic field that it sends out that far exceeds the brains. So in the Western spiritual tradition, we're receiving images from this realm. And when we receive the images, it's not as if we are creating the images. Often when we start doing an imaginal practice, we conjure up an image. And that's fine, and it has its use, and we can use it very effectively to make change. But there's also a possibility that when we get into a more open, focused, relaxed state, that we can draw these images down from the imaginal realm, from the invisible realm, into our hearts, and then it spreads up to the brain, and the brain and the heart, of course, are having a communication all the time. So in this last imagery, you saw that we said to blow the dark clouds away. And image forms the very essence of our language. So if we in fact find, so often when people are depressed, they say, oh, there's a dark cloud hanging over me. Or they may say to you, I'm feeling in the pits. Well, imaginally, you can use that to heal yourself. If you listen to your language, you can begin to heal yourself by reversing the image, because the essence of the imagination and of mental imagery is going into this no time and no space zone and reversing what's going on within you. So if somebody says to you, I'm feeling in the pits, well, then we would ask them, how do you get out of the pits? Imagine, close your eyes for a moment and imagine that you're getting out of the pits. And a person will, and you'll tell the person, or I'll tell the person, to go and bring with you whatever you need, because the imagination is an open realm. It's not confined by our objective reality, nor in time and space, and we can have everything that we need in order to heal. So if somebody is in a dark pit, we want to bring light to the situation, because light is very healing and it relieves all the tension if we know where we're looking. So you have somebody bring with him or her a light or a ladder or a rope so that they can climb out of the pit. And you ask them to climb out of the pit and see what they discover. So in this way, we can use our own language to affect change in ourselves if we can start listening to our own language, because our language will reveal where we're stuck. So I want to do another imagery with you. Let's start with something that Jim mentioned. He mentioned about the nature and nature coming to us, right? So, and being surrounded by nature. So what I want to do is for us to each go into, close our eyes, again, and sitting up straight and breathing out 3 times slowly. And now imagine that you're going into your inner garden. And walk into your inner garden and look around and see if there are flowers and the trees, and notice any scents. And then walk into the center of a garden where you see your own inner tree. And now sit at the base of this great tree that has a strong trunk. And put your back to the tree. And put your feet on the ground so your knees are up. And just begin to breathe with the tree. So it's breathing and you're breathing. And become one with the tree, so that you and the tree are now merged. And sense and feel the sap coming from below up into you and into the tree, nourishing you and feeding you with new strength and energy. And now sense and feel the leaves from this tree sending their chlorophyll down through your body. And as this green chlorophyll flows through your body, it's removing toxins and diseased cells and inflammation and anything that doesn't belong there. And sense the chlorophyll coming down and out through the feet as black and gray strands that are getting buried deep, deep into the earth. And breathe out one time. And now go and separate from the tree. You can hug the tree if you like. And then reverse where you've gone so that you come out of your garden. And if there was a lock on the door of the garden, close it. And you can put the key in your pocket. And then breathe out and open your eyes. So what we just did was we connected with nature, which is so easy and is the first place we look for healing images, because it's our world. It's an extension of our own body, and we're so deeply connected to it. So you can always connect to nature. And in that, we did a healing, right? We use nature to help heal us imaginally. And again, what happens in the mind happens in the body. They're two sides of the same coin. So that's another way that we can use imagery to heal. Now we can also use, so we've used imagery for depression, for hopelessness, for healing from an illness. We can also use imagery to become quiet in ourselves. So here's an imagery to become centered mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So close your eyes and breathe out again 3 times slowly. And imagine that you're going inside to the house of your heart. Now find there a room of anxiety and fear. And go into this room and explore it. Now turn your back on the anxiety and fear. And go out of this room and close the door and find the room of silence and serenity. And go into this room of silence and serenity and explore it. Now be here in this room of silence and serenity and become at one with it. And then breathe out slowly and return. So Deanna, how much time do I have left?
Actually, in a minute or so, usually at quarter after the hour, we'll invite Jim back in. Are you finished? Do you want to add something or?
Just add a little bit more of how we practice imagery. So the way that this imagery is done is you see that it's pretty quick, right? We're not dwelling in it because we're going into the no time, no space zone. But we have to do it in a rhythmic manner to repattern ourselves. So we would do any of these imageries for 10 seconds to a minute to 3 minutes maximally, 3 times a day, because we want to establish and decondition ourselves from the way that we have patterned ourselves. So if we've been feeling depressed, we would do the dark clouds 3 times a day. If we were feeling anxious or we needed to be quiet, we would access this 3 times a day. Sometimes we do imagery only in the morning, but generally we do it in a rhythmic pattern throughout the day. And we do it in the morning before bed and maybe before dinner or after dinner, or you could do it with the change of time. So you could do it at sunrise, sunset, and then before you go to bed. So we're doing it quickly, but we're still feeling what we're doing. We're not doing it so quickly that it just becomes an image. We're still connecting to our bodies and minds. We're connecting ourselves somatically to what we're sensing and feeling. And we would do this generally for 21 days because it's been found that it takes 21 days to break a habit. And so the last thing I want to just say about imagery in general and healing in general is that we always want to come to quiet and cleanse ourselves, so that you'll notice that we always start with the relaxed breathing. Sometimes we and then by the end of the imagery, we want to come into a quiet place. And often when we do imagery, we do a lot of cleansing, because cleansing is a type of detaching and making space. So there's a lot more to say on it, but I think I've run out of time.
Yeah, I just thank you so much. I just love imagery, and I miss Jerry, your late great husband, so much. And he offered so much to the planet and all of us. And you were just delightful. That was so powerful and simple. And the whole point is to, bring realities, into how we can utilize and change our inner selves for what's ailing us.
Right, because we really can't, we can't heal the world till we heal ourselves.
Right.
And this is a process where you can use imagery both to heal yourself physically, emotionally, and then you can bring that out into the world to do general healing for the world. As you know, there's a lot of imagery where people have been doing imagery to heal the Ukraine situation, to heal the planet, etc. But I just want to mention one last thing that connects into the previous talk, which is when you do imagery, you set an intention in the moment. So if you're doing the dark, blowing away the dark clouds, you want to have the intention to lift depression. But when you do it, you're making this intention in the moment, and you're doing it with an aim, not a goal. So that aim, what's the difference between an aim and a goal? Well, an aim is a direction that you're going in. A goal is a fixed image of where you have to be. So here we want to keep an open space in how we approach this healing. So we're not attached to the outcome of whether the depression gets lifted or not. Here we want to just stay with whatever is that comes and keep on doing the imagery rhythmically, and have faith that as you do it, things shift.
Beautiful. It's that non-connotation, the isness of what our intention.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
And it really is in its own way an open, focused intention.
Mm-hmm. In the moment.
In the moment of now. And we're seeding change in the moment of now, because we can only be present. The future is a made-up story. The past is gone, buried, dead, finished.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you. There is an after chat that I hope both of you can join. And I want to invite both Susan and Jim back. Maybe there's some questions Jim may have, or the chat. What a delicious session, both of you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Rachel and Susan. Very rich elixir today. I was wondering, Susan, as you were talking, whether you had studied Jung's notion of active imagination, because what you're describing sounds very similar, and I would imagine grounded in his methodology in that, because that's how he evolved sort of the free association that Freud started with active imagination, almost exactly like you were describing. It's I just wondered what the connection might have been.
I didn't, but it's like Rachel, like you said.
I meant Rachel, yes.
Oh, yes.
Right. This work comes out of actually from the Western spiritual tradition, because it happens to be a visionary path. And the prophets, if you remember, brought down visions from above to help heal the people. However, in modern day, there have been a lot of correlations. My husband's teacher, was Colette Abouker Muscat, and she had this imaginal tradition from her Kabbalistic family that was Algerian. However, she did study with de Swal, who uses a process of imagination, as well as there were other, Loiner also used them. So there were a lot of people in the 20th century that were engaged in imaginal processes, including Jung. I'm not really familiar with Jung, other than in his dream work, he used it differently than our dream work, which I didn't have a chance to discuss. But dreams, of course, are in image form, and they are an even deeper access, to our the invisible subjective realm.
Beautiful. That's the imaginal realm, particularly I think in the Western civilizational tradition, is a very powerful tradition or approach, because it uses what we already do. It's sort of the via positiva as opposed to the via negativa.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that and compliment you on that work. It's very powerful, and it's in some ways it's also the power of intent.
Absolutely. It's your will given direction.
Yeah.
Which is what you're doing. You're using your imagination to access this realm where you can make changes, but in an open, focused way, right? Because we may make discoveries about, if we stay open, then we can really make these discoveries. If we're already fixed, it's very difficult to get into this, into an imaginal state. But the other thing is, just like with open focus, as you practice it, you develop a muscle for it. So even if you're not a great imager, it doesn't matter. Even if you weren't great at open focusing, as you practice it, you become, you strengthen those muscles.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's, go ahead.
The psyche muscle. I always say that to clients. You're developing the psyche muscle, just like you do your biceps or...
And that was what the question I was going to ask you, Susan, about this open focus. I've been recently reading Carlos Castaneda's works that were so influential for so many people in the 70s, 80s,
the
and
old
90s.
days. Yes.
I've been rereading them, and Don Juan Matus, his mentor, makes a very important assertion that it is open focus that is the key, in his view, to two things. Number one, enabling the ego to relax, because he makes the point that open focus is directly related to the loss of our self-importance. Because he says it's our self-importance that's always focusing on what we want, and we're missing the totality of the the whole situation. And number two, he points out that by open focus, one opens oneself not just to the larger context, but to the underlying energy matrix, because the whole thing is interconnected. It's our focus that not only inflates our ego importance, but we lose track of the fact, and I think you were both saying it, that the space, the time and space that we're in is a completely interconnected whole. So that there's these two consequences of an open focus methodology. And he taught Carlos, as you probably remember, how to walk with your eyes just unfocused. And that also leads, he says, to a third, and that is it helps shut down the internal dialogue. So it's a very powerful, powerful technique.
Wow, immersion, definitely.
Well, we have time in the question and answer for Rachel to talk a little bit about dreams. I'd be very interested.
We have 5 minutes left, but there is an after chat.
We could go, I mean, if we want to shift to dreams, but before that, Susan, what would be your comment on that notion of Castaneda's about the utility of open focus?
Well, I think that it all fits together. It sounds very much the same as what we're saying, that in all the great traditions. I think that's what all the great traditions are saying. So it doesn't surprise me. And the ego is a narrow focused event. So it fits, doesn't it? Yeah. And it all fits together. Don't you think it's all saying the same thing? We're just using different language.
Yeah. I spoke
That's
to
a great
in the
line,
world.
Susan, that the ego is a narrow focused event.
Yes. Or as Les would say, love is a way of paying attention.
I love that.
Yeah.
That it's a verb.
Yes.
Love's the verb. And also I sense a like quantum field then. It expands into the quantum reality.
As
That
Jim was
encompasses
saying,
encompasses everything. Rachel's inner reality, the imaginal reality, our reality, and then time-space starts going, whoa, it starts wobbling like maybe it's not real. It's all illusion.
And as you say, Susan, with your husband's work, it's all measurable.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I mean, that this inner ambiguity or free associational non-directedness is all quantifiable through the biofeedback, and you can see how it's affecting your brain heart coherence and your.
But don't you think, Rachel, you'd see the same thing in your methods?
It is. I think it's harder. We did do some studies on the imagination and on where we do see changes. But I think that because it is a much more nebulous science and it's really a subjective experience, it's much harder for people to measure. And the West, scientific method has really just, they don't like empirical studies. So we did do an asthma study where people were able to get off their asthmatic inhalers by using imaginal ones. Right. So you take an imaginal puff with a golden inhaler, because your body already knows what an inhalant is. So if you give it what it's used to, imaginally, it will produce it. Just like in hypnosis, if you give somebody who believes they're allergic to roses a fake rose, they'll still have, go into an allergic response. I just wanted to add one other thing because it just seemed to point out. Complementary with imagination is an educative work that goes along with it. And one of the sort of the themes is not to make anything important, including don't take yourself too seriously. And that also fits in with this open focus, right? If you're not making anything important, it's really much easier to navigate in an open focus method.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention Jerry's book. You can see how much I've used it over the years with ailments that are specific patterns in people that he's been able to document.
Again, Deanna, hold it up again. Hold it up again so people can see it. Healing Visualizations Creating Health Through Imagery.
That's Jerry Epstein's book. Yeah, and this is his other book with his teacher, the Encyclopedia of Mental Imagery from Colette. It's just exquisite, beautiful imagery exercises that have affected people in many difficulties that they're facing, dis-ease patterns. So yeah, we're honored to have you, Rachel. That was beautiful, those exercises.
I think what you'll find in the book, which I really just sort of forgot to cover, was how you can read the meaning of the illness by seeing where your illness is manifesting in the body, because the body is speaking in its own language to you and it's giving you messages.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Beautiful. We could go another hour, couldn't we, Jim, with these two?
Well, I'm just enticed. I know we're at the end of our time, but Rachel, and then maybe Susan, take a few minutes on dreams. We all have dreams.
I'd love to hear, Rachel.
Yeah,
I don't have anything to say, but I'd be fascinated to know what you have to say.
You probably have measured them better than I have.
No, I haven't.
So when we go into our dreams, right, it's an imaginal state, and we're actually connecting to invisible reality. And it's a place that we can, Jerry used to call it the book of life. So we are learning. It's very easy to learn how to read your dreams without ever having to go to a symbol book, because you just have to ask yourself several questions and you can understand your dreams, and it will give you answers. You can either ask yourself before you go to bed for a dream that will give you some information. And the way you would do that is imaginally, you would, with your eyes closed as you're lying down, imagine a cloud and put a golden, have a golden pen with you and write your question into that cloud and then push it to the right into the future. And so your dreams are going to tell you about your state of health. They're going to tell you about paths to take that are open to you. They're going to tell you about false selves that the ego that's getting in the way of going ahead in your life. So it really is a way of practicing and connecting to your higher self.
Mm. Mm.
It's interesting that we do visualizing more naturally when we're asleep than we do in the day. You're just asking people to bring that into other parts.
You can think of imaging as going into the dream life, actively and with knowing participation. Lucid dreaming is going in your dreams and teaching yourself that you can correct your dreams right then and there without having to wait. Or from, let's say, a Sufi tradition, when you lucid dream, you're actually traveling to different dimensions of reality and bringing back knowledge. That's what the shaman is doing when he takes, when he goes into trance, by either taking an entheogen or by drumming. He's getting information and access from the other realms of being. So that's what we're doing in our dream life. So we don't have to look out to anyone. We can just look into our dreams and find our answers. And it is true, I have found people who cannot have a difficulty imaging, day imaging, but can still quite easily access their night imaging. And the way that we use this work is that we give an imagery during the day, right? You go to an imagery practitioner, and it sets the stage for having a night dream. And then when you wake up, you go and explore the night dream like you would an image. And so, for instance, if you have a repetitive nightmare, you can go into the nightmare and reverse that nightmare. I didn't have a chance to really speak about how all this work is reversing and making space, but that's what we would be doing. So you can get to the heart of the nightmare, and the nightmare can stop recurring because you're hearing its message now.
Brilliant.
Right.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both so much. This has been amazing. And Neha, if you're still there, you turn on your video so that we can feel your presence as we come to an end. And maybe, Neha, since you've been doing it throughout the week, why don't you give us just a final blessing or fragment of a poem or whatever you would like. But I want to say, Diana, what you've put together this week has been one of the best programs since we started. I think you've really opened up at a moment in history where I think everybody is grappling for how they navigate what's coming. You've opened up, like you've done today, techniques that are easily available.
Thank you.
And eminently practical and commonsensical, I would say, that we can do without paying anyone. We don't have to go through this big process. We can just breathe. We can just imagine. We can just take care of ourselves in an intuitive, ancestral-based way. So what you've brought to our attention, I just want to acknowledge your mastery.
Thank
Diana.
you. Thank
just want to
you.
acknowledge your mastery, and thank you very much for convening this program.
My pleasure.
Thank you,
It was
Susan.
wonderful.
Thank you, Rachel. Any final words, Diana, you'd like to say to round out the
Just
week?
a very elevating conversation today. I enjoyed that so much. The mental medicine, it was so enriching. And Neha, just to see you and your glory as a poet is extraordinary, and we need to share you with the entire world. But thank you, Jim, for this opportunity. It was an amazing week. It was spontaneous in ways to who I would ask, and everything just kind of congealed together with this new toolkit that is, like you said, so simple and accessible.
Well, thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring our week to a close with some poetry from Neha.
Thank you so much. This is truly a start from the week start to today. It has been a living dream for me as an artist and a poet whose whole life's work is around healing. So thank you so much, Jim, Dehana, Rachel, Susan, and everybody, behind the scenes who makes the event like this and a gathering like this possible. I want to share this short poem, which came to mind, both Jim, from your background, your sharing on trees, Rachel, the imagery, and also Susan, what you were sharing. It's called Sacred Tree Chants for Earth Renewal, and it is about what we can learn from tree elders around the world. So, Sacred Tree Chants for Earth Renewal. May we learn from banyan trees the creativity of growing aerial roots. May we learn from oak trees the engineering of inner depths withstanding violent storms. May we learn from neem trees the healing power of bitter medicines in fragmented sugar lands. May we learn from magnolia trees the artistry of unabashedly embodying our colorful magnificence. May we learn from tamarind trees the weaving of white canopies made of dance of tiny, tiny leaves. May we learn from birch trees the shedding of old skins for welcoming the future now. May we renew. May we renew. May we renew. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you, everyone. You're all welcome to the after chat session. You'll see the link in the chat box. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you here again on Monday, same time, same station for Humanity Rising. But Susan, Rachel, Diana, Neha, wonderful, wonderful week and brilliant session. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.